Good morning, everyone. Today is episode 7 of the podcast, and we will be talking about different movie news that came out this week, including a new Robert Pattinson trailer, and then we'll be going into a review for One Night Only, the new Will Gluck rom-com movie that came out yesterday on August 7th. So, yes. Starting out with the movie news of the week. So, Spider-Man Brand New Day. Last week, huge hit, quickly surpassed Avengers Endgame for the biggest opening weekend Marvel movie, $360 million. Since then, Deadline reported it's the fastest pick to cross $500 million into best domestic box office of all time, and 1.2 billion worldwide is where it sits right now going into weekend 2. Potential for 2 billion. Forbes is tracking that it should at least get to 1.5 billion. But this could be a potentially 2 billion movie, and that's huge news. It surpassed Toy Story 5 now as the biggest, highest grossing movie of 2026. So definitely on its way to success, and whatever people's personal opinions of the movie are, it's clearly doing well at the box office. People are coming out and seeing it. It's a Spider-Man movie after all. So it's just eternally popular for some reason. And that's cool. I'm glad we're getting big movies this year. Funny that it's once again a superhero movie like we talked about last week. Superhero fatigue. Clearly not as much of a thing as people made it out to be, if that's what's happening here. So, yeah. That's Spider-Man Brand New Day. Grown Ups 3 is also just began production this week, and Deadline was reporting about it. There's apparently a photo that got released, I believe Sandler posted, of him and the whole cast for starting the filming of that. And Chris Rock, Kevin James, David Spade, Rob Schneider, Salma Hayek, Maya Rudolph, Mariah Bella, some of the returning casts there, and Bailey Madison and Deion Cole are some newer additions that have been added. Jackie Sandler, Adam's wife, was there as well. And so excited to see where this will go. The first two did quite well, $272 million at the box office for 2010's Grown Ups, and Grown Ups 2 2013 made $247 million worldwide. So pretty decent numbers for a comedy movie. Obviously, that was back in the day when people went out to the theaters to see comedy movies. And currently, like, this third one will be a Netflix production. Don't know if it'll get a theatrical release window. Netflix has kind of been a little more open about that with things like Cliff Booth and Narnia coming up. But at the same time, they are streaming first and foremost. Adam Sandler has had several movies. Last year, Happy Gilmore 2 came out on the service, was pretty popular amongst people. And Adam Sandler's been working with them. He has a production deal with them, and so I believe over 10 projects have been done with the streamers so far, and going on to do more. So this will be a Netflix movie. Kyle Newacek is the director. He did Murder Mystery with Sandler for Netflix and Happy Gilmore 2. And I will say, Happy Gilmore 2, when I first watched it, I really enjoyed it. I think maybe because it's on a streaming service, you come to it with maybe a little less critical eyes. It's like, well, this is a streaming movie. There's something different in our brains when we talk about movies that have theatrical releases and movies that have streaming sometimes. And so I watched it once last year when it came out, and I enjoyed Happy Gilmore 2. And, and upon retrospect, thinking about it more, I don't think it's nearly as good of a movie as I maybe first originally thought. Clearly never reaches the heights of the original, one of my favorite comedy movies of all time. But it did a good job, and people liked it. People tuned into it. A lot of people seem to enjoy it overall, even if it's not the most masterfully crafted movie. Now, none of these movies are the most masterfully crafted movies. They're comedy movies. They're dumb humor, and really it's just Adam Sandler hanging out with his friends doing random shenanigans. So there's a good chance this one will be similar, I think, to Happy Gilmore 2. Hard to track, obviously, box office performance or anything like that when there's no box office, but it is a comedy movie being sequel done by Netflix. I'm assuming it'll perform similarly, and people like the Grown Ups franchise. I mean, most of Adam Sandler's comedy movies are kind of perfect for streaming anyway, because I think there is, as much as us film nerds like to see things in the theater in a theatrical release setting, there's certainly certain kind of movies, certain kinds of shows, rom-coms, usually comedies, even, some of your cozy mysteries that I think, as much as I like to say, oh, I'd love to see everything in the theaters, there's certain movies like earlier this year, Sheep Detectives, which is a movie I misjudged at first, looked like, why isn't this just a Prime Video streaming movie, right? Why is it getting a theatrical release? Now, I'm glad it got a theatrical release. I'm glad I got to go see it. But I do think a lot of Sandler's movies, they're not the spectacle of an IMAX Christopher Nolan film, and they're not necessarily a horror film that, like Obsession, where being in the dark with a bunch of other people responding the same way has the same sort of appeal. Now, I will say comedy movies do in general have a lot of appeal, having a lot of people. If they're funny, right? Then everyone's laughing. They could be worse. But I know a lot of people who like scrolling through Netflix, seeing what just got dropped and watching it. And there's a certain kind of tone, vibe. Some of these, smaller rom-coms, feel-good movies usually that like you put on for a Sunday night when you get the Sunday scaries going into work or whatever, right? And just want to watch something that feels good. And I think comedy movies, watching alone or with just the family, are often more of a feel-good movie. Maybe you're not laughing out loud with the rest of the theater as much, but those do work pretty well as streaming movies. And I think moving forward, we are, especially since Netflix is pushing this so hard, we are going to see kind of a divide between movies that seem made for streaming and movies that seem made for the cinema. Now, that is nothing against Adam Sandler or his movies. I actually really enjoy these movies. I've only seen the first Grown Ups movie, but I enjoyed it. Like I was just saying, it's a great movie. Put on at night, kind of just want to feel good. Something I know is reliable, and I know with Sandler movies, you know what it's going to be going in. You know the kind of humor it is. You know the kind of shenanigans he's up to, and they're just fun. They're lighthearted. They're cheery movies, and it's fun to put on. So, yes, Grown Ups 3 in production. I'll be curious to see how that goes and how it performs. Maybe do a interesting comparison with Happy Gilmore 2 and the future of certain comedies like this. And, there is a spot for these. Clearly, we're out of the comedies era, really, that the 2000s were. And in the 2020s, a lot less of that is going into theaters. A lot less good stuff is going into theaters. So having at least a place to keep having some comedies is worthwhile, even if it's not the experience of, laughing with all your strangers and friends in a theater environment. So definitely, and certain movies I've noticed, this also goes for Supergirl recently, right? It seemed to be doing better on the streaming platforms. I predicted this Supergirl would do better on the streaming platforms. It hasn't gone on full free streaming yet, but on virtual on demand, it's done quite well. And it's, some of these movies, people see all the negative reviews and then are like, well, with ticket prices these days, I'm not going to go buy a ticket. I'll just wait for it on streaming. And then they do well there. It's hard to gauge. And obviously it's hard to call Supergirl a streaming movie since it was made for spectacle. It was made for a lot of money. And it unfortunately did not, return all that money. But on that note, so David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers, was just asked about this because they were like, Supergirl flopped, only 126 million worldwide. Morbius had 167. The Flash had 271, and Joker had 207. That is not a good look for a movie at all. 126, way less than his production costs, and that's not including advertising and all that stuff. So really rough. Definitely not great for Supergirl. So they're asking CEO of Warner Brothers, like, hey, what is the plan moving forward? Are you pivoting anything because of the Supergirl performance? And he's like, well, James Gunn's focused on Man of Tomorrow, and he basically said, no, we're not doing anything. We got a plan. he's like, we have a robust pipeline, and Peter and James are hard at work. So he seems excited. He seems to think that the Superman sequel looks amazing. Now, granted, he also thought that 2003's The Flash looked amazing too. He's the CEO of a company. Of course, he's trying to sell his movies. But it is, I think, an encouraging route, because I know a lot of the DC films in the past, as soon as one underperforms or something, they're bringing in new people, they're firing people, they're changing the tone of the movies. And you kind of got to let, with these franchises, with these universes, let them cook a little bit, right? If we get 5 flops in the row at DC, something needs to change. And maybe even at 3, right? But with this mix of, we got Lanterns coming out this year, we got Clayface coming out this year, Man of Tomorrow next year, letting it just, we are only 2 movies in, 2 shows in. We got to see where this is going. And so far, 3 out of 4 have been solid projects. And so having one flop is obviously not a huge issue. Clearly, I mean, Thunderbolts, sometimes you have good movies like Thunderbolts that flop. Sometimes you have less good movies like the Marvels that also flop. And Marvel has had actually flop after flop, and they still kept persevering. And because of that, we got Spider-Man Brand New Day, Avengers Doomsday in the works. Maybe not the most creative or artistically different movies for cinephiles, but for the everyday audience and for fans of comic books, these are super fun, super important. And we are seeing that Marvel has had a much more steady, and I think this is what's brought them success. You look at some of those Phase 1 movies, they are not that great either. It's not like Marvel was just always 100%. Now, nowadays, looking back, there's a little bit of fondness for some of those early Phase 1 movies, as with anything goes, right? Sequels movies for Star Wars come out, and now the prequels are like the next best thing to The Godfather to some people. So it really, hindsight, right, changes things, and the effect of current movies definitely changes our perspective on older movies. So now, obviously, they're asking David Zaslav all this because it's the end of the second quarter. Things are not looking great for Warner Brothers this year, and with the merger with Paramount's saying, hey, we're going to be doing 30 movies a year. They're like, can you keep up with that? He believes they can, and also, he's not really worried because Superman did do pretty well last year, but especially we got Sinners, we got Minecraft 1 last year, did great for Warner Brothers. Next year, they're going to have Minecraft 2 as well. And they're going to have Minecraft 2 and a new Lord of the Rings movie. So with Man of Tomorrow. So even if this year is a little more underperforming, they still got some projects in the works for the rest of the year. But next year is looking like it's going to be a big year. I mean, Minecraft 1 made a ton of money, whether it should have or not. It's just, these cash cows that they have. They have a lot of good IP, and especially with merging with Paramount, they're going to have even more, a lot to work with there. So definitely not great, but like I said, Supergirl did come home to streaming. It was Fandango at Home's #1 movie for the week of July 27th through August 2nd. I've seen several reviews on Reddit, and you see the same thing over and over again where people are like, well, I finally watched a Supergirl movie and it wasn't as bad as I thought. And it's like, yeah, those Supergirl reviews were pretty brutal. People decide it's not worth, in this economy, buying a ticket to go see, and then they just waited for it on streaming. And I still don't think it's a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, but like I said, I thought it was going to do relatively well on streaming. We're going to see when it hits HBO Max too. I'm sure they'll get lots of views on that as well. Obviously, maybe not as much money from that, but hey, that's how these things go. So, another news, Sam Neill. We talked about him a couple weeks ago when he sadly passed away. But I think then we said that there was going to be 4 more movies with Sam Neill in it that he's already filmed that should be coming out in the next year or so. One of those is going to be The Legend of Zelda. So Deadline released an exclusive that said, yeah, Sam Neill is going to be in Legend of Zelda. We don't know very, very much more than that. It's just he's going to be in it. We already know, like, Bo Bragason is Zelda and Benjamin Evan Ainsworth is Link. Recently, I think earlier this week too, Ganondorf was cast. It's Uli Latukafu, and we also got some more casting deadline reported. Deechan Lachman, Mrs. Casey from Severance, she's going to be in it. She's going to be Zelda's bodyguard, Impa. And Yvonne Strahovski from Chuck will be playing some sort of queen. There's a lot, a lot is being kept very secret. But this video game franchise has sold over 150 million units over the course of its history. It's very popular. I mean, this is probably one of the most anticipated video game adaptations in a long time. So that's very curious and just interesting that we're going to get another Sam Neill performance in there, and it'll be fun to see him again in that. And this will probably be one of his, or if not his last role. It doesn't come out for a while, so there's a good chance that this will be his last role when that releases. But speaking of Sam Neill, Jurassic Park, Jurassic World got some interesting news this week in that Gareth Edwards has left the project over creative differences. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure who's meddling the most in that, but this has happened before. The original Rebirth had David Leitch, tagged to direct it, but he also left over creative differences. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but there's a lot. Now, it does look like, that movie did very well. It brought in $869 million. For a rather mediocre dinosaur movie, it did very well because people love this franchise. People love dinosaurs, like of all ages. And Scarlett Johansson's obviously in it. It's a lot of big star power. Mahershala Ali. So having Johansson, Ali, Jonathan Bailey should return as well. David Koepp's returning as the screenwriter. He wrote the original one. So David Koepp's kind of, 50-50, flip a coin. Obviously, he has some great works in the past. And then we have some stuff like Jurassic World Rebirth that just wasn't as exciting. And, it wasn't necessarily bad, but it just did not. The biggest thing is more people need to get eaten. They teased that this was going to be more of a horrific vibe in this, and I was really hoping for that because, Gareth Edwards, hearing the cast, like Scarlett Johansson's always wanted to be in this. We're getting the original screenwriter again. We're getting an amazing composer. We're getting Gareth Edwards, who did Godzilla and Monsters, and he's, did one of the most successful Star Wars movies of late, probably my favorite of the last 10 years. And he's coming in. He has a great creative eye, and you definitely saw that. Some of those shots were really beautiful. Some of it a little fake. We want to see dinosaurs in our world, not in some, random Godzilla world or whatever, the the place under the ocean or whatever, Journey to the Center of the Earth kind of stuff. So I like, dinosaurs, real people. We need people eating, that horror vibe. And whatever people say about the Jurassic World franchise, I actually liked both the original Jurassic World and Jurassic World 2 because that second one, Fallen Kingdom, I know a lot of people complained about the clone stuff. I get that. But tonally, it was interesting. It was in a new location, having literally a mansion where you're running around hiding from dinosaurs. That is freaky. It's scary. Really liked that. And I want them to go more into those horror tones that really make the franchise successful. You look at some of those original Jurassic Park shots, and even though kids everywhere like it, there's some like terrifying shots, a lot of unknown thing, people being pulled by the legs. You don't see the dinosaur, you just see the look on their face, and we need more of that. So, I'm excited to see where it goes. The last two Jurassic Worlds have been pretty rough. Hopefully they can learn their lesson. They probably won't, but hopefully they do, and we can get a better one. And with Gareth Edwards leaving, I like him as a director, but considering the last one did not do as well, if they hire the right person with the right creative mindset, we might get another good Jurassic Park movie. And there's none of them are as great as the original, but we've had some fun with them. And for Jurassic Park fans like myself, I will always go and see these. I'm excited to see them. The last two had so few deaths. Felt like Jurassic Park, the spy movie, and, Jurassic Park, the island adventure story, but without really dinosaurs doing anything. So it's just, yeah, they've not really bought into that horrific vibe that the original few did pretty well. I think we all can remember the blood and the waterfall from the Lost World, or seeing the velociraptors in the tall grass. That's, terrifying stuff. So would like more of that. I've talked about that before. So hoping to see that. I'm excited that there's going to be a sequel, just because I like dinosaur movies, like everyone else apparently, because, 869 million. Comparing that even to Supergirl's 126, that's quite a difference in interest for movies that are, relatively filling a same role of a decent, fun adventure, but not quite hitting all the high marks they should. So pretty interesting. More superhero news coming out, obviously, with Brand New Day coming out. We got Samara Weaving as Emma Frost now. We already have Sadie Sink as Jean Grey in that movie. Kit Connor is apparently going to be Cyclops, is what came out this week. That's interesting. They're definitely going for a younger X-Men cast, which I approve of. Kit Connor is only 22 years old, should match well with a 24-year-old Sadie Sink, which is, in the comics, there's romance there, there's stuff. So it'll be interesting. Now, James Marsden's Cyclops is in Avengers Doomsday, so it's going to be interesting seeing how do they wrap up the Fox X-Men universe and start this one off. It's definitely been a messy couple of movies. No Way Home bringing in the old Spider-Mans, Wolverine appearing in Deadpool and Wolverine. Now in Avengers Doomsday, we have like all these Marvel superheroes from all different timelines showing up in the same movie. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I think Marvel does need to clean it up a little bit, though. Get us back on a track where we're not confused by all the recasting and all that stuff going on. And they have a plan till 2042, apparently. I'd like to see that. That's what made the original MCU good. Even if you didn't have all the characters yet, you had a cohesive story with familiar faces in every single movie. So we'll see. I'm curious for sure. We're going to hear a lot more. It's going to be X-Men this, X-Men that until that movie comes out. I believe it's 2028. But definitely casting a lot of people, casting a lot younger people, which is good, especially if you want the longevity. So that'll be interesting. Kit Connor was in Heartstopper, and he's also in Warfare and going to be in the Elden Ring with Alex Garland. So definitely younger face, up-and-coming actor. That's a good thing. That's what I want to see more of, is taking maybe a little more risk. Not that much risk in this case, but with some younger actors who can really make it big with Marvel. And you hope that for everyone. I definitely feel bad for Supergirl's Millie Alcock, being in a movie that should have been her big break, and it didn't end up being as big. But there's still chances with DC. There's still things gonna happen there. Obviously, Sadie Sink, Stranger Things is her big break, but now being in X-Men, that's going to even propel her career more. So that's what we want to see with Star Wars, with Marvel movies. These movies, they have a lot of money behind them. They have a lot of money going out of them. And it's fun to see some old familiar faces, big names that you can buying Harrison Ford or whatever for, what was it, Brave New World. Yeah, it's fun. But I definitely like, and that's something that Star Wars did well, and some of the earlier Marvel movies, is you're making stars out of young people. And sometimes that really works. And sometimes, like Xochitl Gomez's case, like she was part of that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Haven't seen too much of her since. Hopefully we'll see a little more. Who knows? But it doesn't always hit. And finally, I want to talk about a trailer that came out this week, and it's Primetime. This is the new Robert Pattinson movie. He is in a lot of movies this year, right? Lance Oppenheim's directing it. Release date is this September 25th. So it's coming out soon. New A24 movie. And this is about Chris Hansen's Dateline NBC To Catch a Predator show. Ran from 2004 to 2007. Now, I never actually grew up watching this show. I haven't seen a single episode. I'd be curious to look back at it. But just, Googling Wikipedia, different things, it's a really interesting idea for a show. Basically, they used hidden cameras, if you don't know, hidden cameras around a room and conducted these sting operations to catch like online predators. And they'd usually use like adults posing as a minor. Well, always adults posing as a minor, but they would use these to bring in a predator. And then, Chris Hansen comes out and he starts talking, and he has a line that's pretty famous. You see how this looks, right? And the way he says it, it was really interesting. They say that line in the trailer. I've seen some clips from the original show where he says that line, and Robert Pattinson is doing a really good job embodying Chris Hansen in this, and that voice and the way he approaches things. I'm very curious about that. Now it's interesting because many of these individuals in the original show would get caught as predators and then would be arrested by law enforcement. But there was a lot of ethical, legal concerns about like entrapment laws. Is this ethical to be catching predators in this way? Obviously, what the predators are doing is not not a good thing at all. But then the show got canceled in 2008. There was a suicide of the assistant DA, Bill Conrad, after an attempted search warrant for him for similar unfortunate things. So interesting. I'm curious if they'll lean into that a bit. I don't know what areas they're going to be portraying in this movie. We'll definitely be doing a review of this on this podcast. But for someone who doesn't know much about the original show or about Chris Hansen's life or many of the drama around here, I just know this little overview. I'm hoping that the movie will kind of show more of a side, maybe the psychological side, what it's like, what it was like to be part of these sting operations. And that's what we want, right? You got like Michael earlier this year. That was basically a compilation of all his, music videos, and didn't really show much more into his personal life or the struggles of his life. And I don't think that's where they're going with this. This looks like it's going to have a little more depth to it, but we're gonna see. You never know, right? Till you see it. But Skylar Gisando's in this as well. He was Jimmy Olsen in Superman last year. He's one of the adults posing as a minor, which is perfect. He has a very young face, so that kind of works for this scenario. And Robert Pattinson's in it, a lot of other people, but definitely going to be an interesting movie to watch, especially considering I haven't seen. I might have to go back and watch one of those older episodes, and just see what it was about. But for those of you who have seen it, I'll be curious to see what your thoughts are on the new movie as well. If it captures the original feel of the show, maybe we learn something new in the story as well. So that'll be really, really interesting. So that's it for film news right now. Now I'm going to move into a segment where we can discuss the new Monica Barbaro, Callum Turner, Will Gluck film that is one night only. So I went and saw this yesterday. Didn't really have a ton of expectations going in. Will Gluck has done Anyone But You. Still haven't seen that film, so don't really know a lot. I knew it was going to be a rom-com. I had some ideas for what it was going to try to do, and we'll talk about that a little more. But first, for a spoiler-free segment, Monica Barbaro and Callum Turner are in this movie. Monica Barbaro plays a advertisement singer, like those psoriasis or, Crohn's disease commercials with catchy tunes, often reusing old pop songs to, sell whatever they're trying to sell for the medical commercials. And so she's an advertisement singer, and then Callum Turner's a pizza shop owner, runs his little pizza shop in New York, and it's pretty cool. So the log line is that, two New Yorkers search for love on the one night of the year when sex is legal, and that's premarital sex, that is. So in this world, there's like kind of this regime that has dictated, what would be better for everyone is if you only have sex when you're married. And so they put these trackers in people that track their, dopamine levels. They do all this biological measurements in coordination with location to other people. And if you're having a lot of the physiological responses to sex and someone else is as well, then it flags you and law enforcement shows up and they try to, deal with it. Kind of a very, government is watching, Big Brother, Orwellian, you know, dystopian in a way, but it's not portrayed very as dystopian as it could be. Uh, but it's this world now. They're like, we're a country of compromise. So one night a year, and in this case, it's August 7th. So the day it was released, right? One night a year, you can do what you want for 12 hours. And so now it's become this big cultural event. This has been a law for 3 years. And all these, especially young unmarried people, are going and they have a tracker in their wrist. It's like red most of the year, and then it's green for this. And it can be a tattoo of kind of like anything they want. They just choose it. Monica Barbaro has a lighthouse on hers, and Callum Turner has a bat for various reasons. And when it turns green, people in the city go crazy. There's condom shortages. They're running around, chasing each other. Some people who are in relationships, hang out with their person, but that's not always the case. And actually, that is one of the kind of inciting events with this movie is Callum Turner's girlfriend, Maya Hawke, wants to sleep with their neighbor, and he's about to propose to her, and she's like, nope, I kind of feel like it'd be good for me to try something else. You should too. Not a great idea at all. And it is not much of a spoiler because this is just in the first couple minutes of the film that we see this. And Monica Barbaro and her best friend, they're looking for their Prince Charmings. They're like, we don't want. They've obviously this has been several years in a row they've had this, and they're like, in the last years we've just ended up with guys. So that's kind of the premise, and it's they really like. It's an interesting idea. They definitely do not. There's signs protesting the mandate, but there's never many protests. There's not a lot of political stuff in there. They kind of portray it as, they're definitely trying to lean into 2026 America and some of the right versus left thing in a very small way at the beginning, setting up the premise like, oh, this is something conservatives would want, liberals wouldn't. And they're like, sure enough, and this is true, STDs go down, out of wedlock birth rates obviously go down, things like that. Because on this one night a year, you also always have to use protection. I don't know how they track that. Yeah, but there's a lot of Will Gluck has come out and said the world, don't think about it too hard, right? It's just a premise to set up this rom-com. So really interesting idea. Definitely don't really dive into it as well. I think it just didn't. It failed to use its premise to the max, right? It doesn't address this fascist world that they're a part of, other than like a couple scenes setting up the premise. And they do, it's a world people are creative. Like people are obviously going to be curious. How do they track this? How do they do that? And so they do spend time, not all at once, but over the first 20 or 30 minutes, incrementally in different ways, they share more and more information about how the world works. Obviously, it's never fully fleshed out, and I don't really think that's how people would respond either. It kind of sets up this world where people don't like the mandate, but everyone's kind of just rolling with it anyway, and like they're just at the one night a year comes around and they're like, yes, let's do this thing, right? It's kind of weird. So definitely doesn't address that, and that's not necessarily what I expected to address. This was obviously marketed as a rom-com. I did not think it was going to be a nuanced take on, the role of fascism and legislating morality in our country. But I did wonder if it would be a little bit more of a contemplative, philosophical conversation on love and sex and how that all plays together. Maybe be a little smarter. It's definitely not the smartest comedy I've seen addressing topics like sex. I think last year's Splitsville did a really good job, and this year's The Invite did great with that, where they're dealing with these more taboo kind of odd topics, but using that premise to illuminate some other issue or truth about how the different sexes interact, how people interact with one another, and exploring the like philosophical and sociological aspects of that in film. I think that could have been what this movie could have tried to do. And in the end, it's kind of just a okay rom-com. I had a good time watching it. It was fun, but it doesn't ever try to use its premise to the max. It doesn't really complete the conversation around that either. So it's not the most funny comedy either. It's more of a like, oh, that's sweet, that's cute, that's fun. I will say the two leads did a great job. I like both Callum Turner and Monica Barbaro. They have pretty decent chemistry in this movie, casted well. The costuming is fun, as well. It definitely plays into the story, and they do a good job. Like I said, the lore isn't all just dropped at you at once. It's not like a 5-minute intro that explains the rules of the world. It's never fully explained at either. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions and loopholes people think about this movie. Cinema Sins is probably going to have a field day with this, but they do slowly introduce it in a relatively organic way. It's a fun movie. Like we talked about earlier, I think this is going to be one of those movies that does pretty well on streaming. Not a jab at the creators, but it just fits the tone and vibe of a lot of people I know who don't go to the movies. They want something fun and lighthearted put on one evening while they're scrolling their phones. Maybe they do pay attention when it gets to the finale, but it's kind of a enjoyable streaming movie rather. So yeah, that's what I'll say for spoiler free. I thought it was a good movie. I didn't think it was great. And it's in the middle. I had a fun time, but I definitely think with that premise, there's so much you could do with it, and so many different ways that you could go. You could go the more Orwellian way. You could even go more like Eric Romer, where it's this conversations between people about love and relationships and figuring things out. And that's definitely what I was hoping for more. Did not get that. But we're going to talk about that a little more in our in-depth analysis. So this is no longer spoiler-free, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about this movie. So if you haven't seen it already, I would suggest going and seeing it first, or if you don't care to see it, have fun listening to my review of it. So, okay, so starting off, some things that they did well with the premise is they definitely show different facets of like how do different people approach this one night. Some people, like I said, their boyfriend and girlfriend, they're obviously waiting to do it together, but there's people who are looking for that, one night stand. There's dating apps specifically for that night where you're swiping right and left, just trying to find someone. A lot of desperation in this movie too, especially amongst young people. And there's people that are taken advantage of, right? At one point, Callum Turner swipes right on a dating app for this world and goes to a park to meet a girl. They're both attractive people. It's like, this is going to work out. Interesting note, too, about this world is because it's a weird world in that it's so legislated, this morality, that on the one night a year where it is allowed, everyone goes crazy. There's a lot of public indecency. And no one really cares because it's like, well, this is the one night when we can express this freedom. It's interesting. So it shows the dating apps, but this person in the park takes advantage of him, ties him up and then steals all his stuff. That's one thing. Obviously, there's like condom shortages because everyone has to use protection and there is no way. Maybe the condom companies could have made more, but there's definitely it's in New York. There's going to be a shortage. People going out, maybe hoarding some of this stuff. And there's people who schedule it. There's a guy who talks to Monica Barbaro and he shows a phone and is like, "Oh, I can plot you in between 4 and 4:30. Are you good with that?" Or something like that. I'm not quoting it one for one, but it's definitely essentially, I've planned this out. I'm trying to sleep with as many people on this one night as I can. A lot of lack of romance. And that is what this movie is trying to say. It's trying to say romance isn't really about sex. Both Monica Barbaro and Callum Turner at one point have a conversation. This is the part that I was most looking forward to. They're sitting in the pizza shop they're talking, and he says his favorite part of sex is after, and her favorite part is before. So it's actually not about the sex, right? And they're showing that it's turned it into such an unromantic thing in this world because people are, putting people on their list. Famous people are maybe abusing their fame in a way that only satisfies them. There's just a lot of interesting aspects of this world, but the main, I think, purpose that Will Gluck's trying to get across is, hey, the romance is not about sex. And this is what it's a rom-com. I was looking at the trailer and I predicted a lot of things about it. Now, one thing I will say I did not predict is they were both, how I thought it was going to be is, so he gets left by his girlfriend, right? Callum Turner. Monica Barbaro is looking for love. Her best friend finds someone like right away, right? And so then she's left alone. And what I was maybe hoping for in my cinephile heart was that it would be these two people who are relatively kind, at the beginning, they both show a kind of resignation of, well, it just didn't work out tonight. And they go back to their apartments, back to their homes. They get encouraged by other people to go back out. They run into each other. And here I'm thinking, now they're going to spend all night. And my original prediction was they're going to spend all night talking to each other. And then at the end of the night, they're not going to end up sleeping together because they found that there was so much more than just sex in romance and just getting to know one another and that actual more intimate connection in a way of just getting to know one another, getting to learn about the other person in a way that is kind to both people. I think that's where I thought it was going to go. And it definitely, I was right in some parts of it. However, I was surprised how quickly if they start out as these resigned, like, well, I'm looking for love. It didn't work out for me. Whatever. Oh, well. And then they get encouraged to go out in the world. They run into each other. He vomits for some reason. And because of that, then they spread apart. And it becomes actually more of a two ships in the night situation where they keep crossing paths. Works a little better, I guess, as a rom-com in that way. But they very quickly turn their personalities from these people who seem maybe a little more, and I'm conservative, not in a political way, but in a, personal lifestyle way. They're not the guy with the schedule with person blocked in it for every 30 minutes. And they're wanting to find true love. And they very quickly go from that to desperately finding, okay, they each have someone that they're going to sleep with. Then they're trying to find condoms. Then they run into each other again. Then both those people end up not being the one. Then they found two more people at a party later on, and they're both going to sleep with them, and then things interrupt that. And it's like there's so many points during this night where either character would have slept with someone else or other circumstances not to have interrupted them, which to me makes the movie feel a little less sweet and less what it is trying to say, right? Of that, it's not about sex, it's about the romance. And it just seems to kind of tarnish that because these two people do seem very thoughtful, more reserved people at the beginning. And then now they are in desperation mode, just like the rest of New York, trying to find their one person. And in the end, they do come together. They have that scene at the pizza parlor where they get to talk. The girlfriend comes back into the picture to kind of give the final little bit of drama, though it's not a lot. And then it's one of those movies where it's two people who finally realize we want to be with each other, trying to figure out where the other person is with very few minutes left in the day. And one thing I like is throughout the movie, they keep talking about having your Empire State Building moment where you're sitting on top, you finally meet the one on top of the Empire State Building with the sunrise. But earlier in the movie, she also explains that there's a little red lighthouse is what she picked for her tracker because there's a red lighthouse that she's always loved going and being at. And that they do decide to have the very final scene at this red lighthouse. And they both figure out, they make you think they're going to meet in the Empire State Building. And then they actually meet at this red lighthouse. I thought that was a relatively decent twist. It got me for sure. I thought that was cool that they both knew, okay, the Empire State Building moment isn't about the Empire State Building. It's about what's important to her. And for her, it was that lighthouse. And so they meet there. They look like they're about to do it. And they're like, you know what? Let's not let the government mandate this. Let's just get to know each other for a year and we can try again next year. And that is exactly what I thought was going to happen. Like, yep, they're going to go through the night and they're not going to end up having sex. That was my prediction going into it. Definitely got there in a less sweet, meaningful, conversational, philosophical way than I would have hoped, and a lot more of the frantic rom-com shenanigans that you usually get, albeit without maybe as much comedy as you could have. So I think it's interesting. I do wish this is definitely, like I said, the left-wing nightmare, maybe a little bit hinting at the current administration and the fears that surround that. But they just kind of leave it at that. This world doesn't have a lot of protests. Everyone, like I said, is way more concerned to just find their person. The desperation kicks in, becomes very unromantic on that night. One thing I did think was funny is they had the surprise cameos of both Glenn Powell. So the neighbor that Maya Hawke wants to sleep with is Glenn Powell. And on his dating app, Callum Turner finds Sydney Sweeney, which are both stars in Anyone But You, Will Gluck's last rom-com. And Sydney Sweeney's profile actually says Bea, which is her character Beatrice from Anyone But You. So that was a little fun Easter egg in there. It was interesting. Like I said, I just don't feel like it ever quite reaches the heights of being an Orwellian thing, being a Romerian conversation about relationships, or it just never, or even just being full silly Netflix style rom-com, right? It just kind of doesn't hit one thing very well. Now, I enjoyed it though. I still had a fun time, so I don't want to be too harsh on it in that respect. I did enjoy it. One thing I thought was interesting though is Variety released a piece that said, for a movie about sex, there is very little, almost no nudity. I believe you see two men's butts at different times, which is also a prediction I made, let me say, because I'm going in and I'm like, there's probably going to be nudity in it, but in 2026, I'm betting it's a male butt. It's just the way we've gone in this day, right? And I think an encouraging way, the 80s to the 2000s, a lot of over-sexualization, objectification of women. Then you saw in the 2010s kind of the reversal of that. We're seeing a societal shift. And then nowadays, often it's a male butt played for comedy rather than, sexual interests. So I predicted that, knowing 2026, knowing where it's going to be. I'm like, for a movie about sex, I'm assuming this is going to have very little nudity. And I was right. I was not hoping for a lot of nudity, I should say. But what was interesting is after me thinking that, after going and seeing the movie, Variety posted a story that interviewed Will Gluck, and they talk about this. They're like, there's not a lot of nudity in the film for a movie about sex. And he said that apparently they did actually film with a lot more nudity, things kind of in the background. Obviously, like I said, there's the public indecency is not really a thing in this movie because no one cares. It's the one night a year where you can be that way. And one thing he said is, Variety was asking him, they're like, you know what? Studies have recently shown that Gen Z and Gen Alpha, which I'm kind of early Gen Z, late millennial, they've shown that they don't want to see sex on screen. I think that's really interesting. And Will Gluck responds, he says, it's not just those generations, but a societal shift. He said, quote, now it's more of a private, intimate thing that people don't want to see when they're in a shared experience. That shared experience obviously being a movie theater experience, right? And so he actually cut out a lot of nudity that was in the film because he noticed, and I think this is true. I think this is true even going back to the 80s and the 2000s. People just were less aware of it then. But he's like, it takes people out of the film. So I thought this was really interesting just from like a social experiment standpoint. They did a screen test like most movies, and they noticed whenever the screen panned and in the background there was a couple having sex or whatever, a lot of people would stop watching the movie and look to their neighbors or whoever they came with, right? It took them out of the movie because there is something awkward. Like he said, it's more of a private, intimate thing now. And so they just kept cutting all of that out until they didn't get that response. So one, I thought that was an interesting way to edit a movie. And two, it's just an interesting societal experiment showing that we have shifted our priorities. In my opinion, in a positive way. I think a lot of sex and nudity in film has been unnecessary, sometimes exploitative. So not always good. It has its place for sure in certain situations. In this case, I guess in comedic situations, right? But beyond that, it should be used very few and far between. I don't really think, never want to censor anything. I think that it would go against exactly the idea of this government controlling movie, but I do think it's better to see less of that because there is exploitative situations, and often it was not actually in service to the story, but more in service of getting more people to come out to it, maybe, especially men usually. So I thought that was a really interesting experiment that Variety highlighted in their article there. And Will Gluck just noticing that as he's making this movie. So definitely interesting. It's a fun movie. I had a good time. I like the two leads. They've got a lot of energy and charisma to them. So I enjoyed it. But it has its flaws. And like I said, it kind of just goes halfway with the premise. It goes halfway with the romance, with the comedy too. It's just kind of halfway on all that part. So I don't think it succeeds as one of the great comedies of the year, great rom-coms. I also don't think it succeeds in like the way The Invite and Splitsville did, where it's a really interesting conversation about how people interact. Or going back to Romare, right? Tale of Winter, Tale of Summertime, where it's just people talking. My Night at Maud's. I love Romare, if you can't tell. And just those conversations where they are exploring these topics, often over a night or over a certain time period in just conversation, right? So it wasn't any of that. It kind of was halfway in all of the parts, but I did enjoy it. And at the end, they're at the red lighthouse, and they kind of play into a gag that the commercial that she was singing for at the beginning ends up being filmed at that lighthouse, and they end up being in the commercial, and it's just funny. I will say those moments were there's a couple things that colored the world. There was Duolingo ads everywhere. Duolingo owls everywhere, and he thrives in, fascist regime. But then the commercials. I hate all those commercials that are just health medicine commercials. They don't have it in other countries, but we have a lot of it here, and often for diseases that most people are not dealing with. I certainly want those people who have those issues to get the help they need, but I've never seen. There is something comedic about the health commercial, in that it is just kind of outrageous. It's often targeted toward very specific people. Also, I don't know why I would go to a doctor who has medical training and be like, I saw this commercial for this. Can I use this? Is this better for me? I don't know. Maybe it works for some people. It must. They keep doing it. But there is something comedic. And then obviously the long laundry list of all the side effects that could come out of it. So it's funny. I thought they did a good job with that. So it has its moments for sure. I think he did a good job with Someplace. Like I said, I think it's going to do well on streaming, but definitely not hitting all the highs that you would hope from a comedy that's either very, self-aware and has something to say, or even if it's just straight rom-com, maybe making it just a little more sweet and cute. I don't know if you have to go all the way into this Orwellian, dystopia as much. That being said, if you haven't seen it already, go see the movie. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on it as well. And that kind of wraps up this episode. Next week, my plan is to talk about The End of Oak Street. Speaking of dinosaurs again, hoping that's going to really hit well as one of my more anticipated films of the latter half of 2026. But that I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening. Let me know your thoughts and have a great day.